Okay, so this is the version of code that we had at the end of class. And what we were talking about was the fact that we were able to check for both rows by duplicating our code, but we knew it wasn't good. But where we are is that we actually have the two tests here, one that's checking the top row and one that's checking the middle row. And if we run these tests, we see that they both pass. But we don't like the code that we have. So we have this duplication here, which is the thing we talked about in class. But as I look at the code, there's actually something else I don't like here. And that is that we have within these three subconditions, we have two different types of things that we're checking. First, we check that we have an x in 0, 0. And then we check that 0, 0 equals 0, 1 and 0, 1 equals 0, 2. So there's two different types of checks. So the first thing I want to do is just make it all consistent. So what I'm going to do is, instead of checking that this kind of the transitive nature here, I'm going to actually change it that I want board 0, 1 to equal the board mark x, and board 0, 2 to equal board mark x. And I think I did that right. And I did, because the test still passes. And so now I can just make sure that it works for row 1 as well. And great, it does. So I made that change. I actually like this version better because now we have three subconditions that are all the same. We're just checking to make sure that all three of them are x's. So I like this better. The other thing that we had noticed is that we have this commonality. And so when we recognize commonality, a nice way to get rid of that duplication is to use an extra function. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to create private Boolean. Let's see, what do we call this function? We're testing that everything in the row is the same. So is all same row. Let's see, board is a class variable, so all I really need to pass here is the row. And in that method, I'm just going to take this condition, and if they're all the same, then I can return true, and if they're not all the same, I can return false. And to make it work in a general sense, I need to change these zeros to row. And to make sure, so now I can change the original code. So if is all same row 0, close the parenthesis, then I return that. And if is all same row 1, close that parenthesis, I return that. And did I do that right? Yes, all 4 tests pass. And so this is better. I like this a lot better already, but I still have a couple of improvements I can make. So down here in the method, if we think about this logic, the logic says if this condition is true, then return true, and if this condition is false, then return false. So that's actually just us saying that whatever this condition is, that's what I should return. There we go. So verify that that's correct. I'll run my tests again. Yes, so that is correct. And now I notice up here in the getStatus method that I have basically the same condition with a different parameter each time and the same return value. So what I can say is that if is all same row 1, or is all same row 0, or is all same row 1, then return this, and that simplifies it down even more, and they should all pass. And they all pass. Great. So now I've actually improved my code a great deal here. I like this. I don't see any additional improvement to make at this point to make it better. So now we can actually move on and think about another test. But before I begin that second test, I actually want to talk about improvements to my test code, because we can see that these 3 lines of code in the top row test are really the same as these 3 lines of code. So I'm going to do essentially the same kind of trick. That what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a private method, set row all same. In this case, because board is not a class member, I'll have to pass it. So TicTacToe board and the int row. And so what I'm going to do, I'll just take these 3. So copy those, and again, instead of a hard-coded one, I want that to be row. And now I can replace these lines with a call to set all same, the board. This is the middle row, so that's 1. And up here, these are set all same in the board and row 0. So if I did that right, my test should still pass. Perfect. And now, here's where I actually get some value for what we just did. I can add another test, public void, oh, you know what? I'm just going to copy it and I'll change it. So I'll copy this test, and now I can talk about the bottom row. And so now I want to set all the same in row 2, the bottom row, and then assert that X should win in that. And this actually should fail because we haven't implemented that now. But that was easy to add. And coming back here into our code, it's also easy to make that change. So or is all same row 2. And yes, as expected, all 5 of our tests are passing. So what I did here is I improved our code. Right? I improved both the implementation of TicTacToe and I improved the implementation of our tests. In both cases, I used a private helper method. Right? And what we saw is that not only improved the code, but it actually made it easier to add more functionality.